Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of This Week in Crypto Philanthropy, where we highlight the top giving news, stories, and the power of crypto for good. My name is Nick Mikulewski, Senior Sales Manager here at The Giving Block, and as always, joined by my colleague Pietro Moran. Pietro, how you doing?
Doing well. It's good to have you back, Nick. I know we didn't have you on last week's episode, but stoked to bring you back because we have a very exciting one in the books for today. So, yeah, a lot going on in the crypto markets, and I think we're going to cover some of that today. But we also have a very special guest waiting in the wings for us. But Nick, why don't you introduce what we've got on the schedule for today?
Yeah, and from time to time, as everybody knows, we bring on some special guests, and could be more excited that we have a real special guest when it comes to the giving block and crypto and how we've managed to make the things that we do here actually work. This is probably one of our most critical, long-standing partners. So without further ado, want to welcome Paget Stanko from Gemini. Paget, thanks so much for joining.
Yeah, good morning, guys. Happy to be here.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, Paget, would love to kick things off with just a quick kind of question on what Gemini is for folks that just haven't heard the name or sort of know the name tangentially, and then would love to hear how you got into crypto as well. Love to hear the origin story.
Yeah, happy to do so. So Gemini is a US-based regulated cryptocurrency exchange and custodian at its core. Obviously, beyond that, we offer some great additional products and features and functionalities across the trading ecosystem, but we really are a place for retail and institutional investors to buy, sell, and store their cryptocurrency assets. I myself have been at Gemini for just over 7 years now, which we all know in the crypto space is dog years for sure. And throughout that time, I have been overseeing business development on our institutional team. So my role really consists of kind of a combination of thinking strategically about the space as well as managing some of our key relationships, whether that's crypto native and some of our token teams or fintech partners and intermediaries like the Giving Block. I don't know. I don't want to age all of us here, or really, I guess time has gone by so quickly, but I actually met the Giving Block team, I think it's almost 6 years ago at this point. It was early 2019, I believe, on the street of Washington, D.C. And it was an idea at the time to try to get nonprofits into the crypto space and be able to have them benefit from integrating the charitable world into this new and evolving crypto space. And all these years later, we're going strong.
Yeah, fantastic. And Pietro, I want to bring you into the conversation, but it's been quite the timeline with Gemini, huh?
It's incredible, honestly. I think I was very lucky. I think, Paget, to meet you like the first week that I started at the Giving Block in September. I want to say almost 4 years ago now. And it's super funny. Like, just as an anecdote, I have a billboard outside on the corner in Miami that actually has a Gemini ad running on it. So I see you guys actually kind of topically every day as I walk to get coffee. One of the things I wanted to talk about, Paget, now that we have you here, is just really how you see like the interplay and relationship between like critical service providers like Gemini and exchanges and folks like us at the Giving Block. Our mission is really to bring the charitable world to crypto, but then the infrastructure, the plumbing of the whole system is folks like yourselves. Wanted to get a sense, like, one, how you see that interplay and how that relationship is important for Gemini, and then also like want to pivot a little bit towards just the broader ecosystem, because we get a lot of questions from donors, nonprofits, and they're saying, hey, like, I keep hearing about crypto. It's in the news. The new administration's talking about it. We seem to be a little more constructive these days. Would love to get your thoughts there. I know that was maybe a two-parter, but would be super great to hear your take there.
Yeah, happy to. I think, right, looking at the Giving Block and Gemini together and how we've been able to continue to support you guys, obviously seen so much growth over all these years. But I think it really comes down to aligning on our missions, right? As I understand it, the Giving Block has always wanted to give charities the ability to access crypto and have a way into this new asset class. And I think Gemini's mission of making it really easy and really secure for users to access this asset class completely aligns with that, right? When you're looking at Gemini and the Giving Blocks relationship, you've got now the ability for donors to have access to this asset class and then now donate. What was it in your annual report? I think hundreds of nonprofits at this point have received over $1 billion in digital asset donations. I mean, that's absolutely incredible. So, from the top, right, looking at the mission and understanding where we really align of secure and easy access. And then going on that, right, Gemini's always been, I think, a leader in supporting the charitable space, right? Whether it was our first Giving Tuesday or the annual support of that, we've continued to kind of serve as a player on the front end, right? And be really aligned from a brand, marketing, communication standpoint, but also on the back end. And I think that's actually what's really important for many out there to understand is Gemini serves as a qualified custodian for the nonprofit entities that the Giving Block works with. So we are really sitting on the back end to not only give the access to receive and send out those cryptocurrency donations, but also liquidate them, right? So at the end of the day, if a nonprofit's going to hold on to those cryptocurrency assets and make an investment, so to speak, right, they have the ability to do so. But if they're just looking to donate that in from, a donor who wants to give Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever asset it may be, they can also use Gemini to receive that donation and liquidate it, and use those funds for whatever may be needed at that time. So I think, the relationship has obviously evolved. You guys have grown so much, but at the core, our missions are really aligned and you guys are able to access and use our platform more on the back end to give exactly all those same functionality to your end clients.
Yeah, and to that point, I mean, it's one of the things when we're having conversations with nonprofits. There's, they are very pleased to hear that we take some of the key themes very seriously on the Giving Block side, and with Gemini. And I know that you're kind of the four main kind of pillars of Gemini is product, security, licensing, and compliance, and it's that back half of those like security, licensing, compliance that nonprofits get very pleased to hear that it's certainly very important to them, certainly very important to us. So if you wouldn't mind maybe just double clicking a little bit on that whole side of things, because Gemini is kind of known for taking a very judicious approach in the space. I think it's one of the great things about your brand.
Yeah, most definitely. We have always been kind of asked for permission first, right? And with that security and compliance, regulatory focused mindset, we still are today. And so, yeah, we sit as a US based New York trust company. So we're regulated by the DFS. And everything we do, has those approvals. So exactly as you're speaking to, Nick, we kind of check those boxes in terms of what more of a traditional regulated entity will look like. So I think, again, it's making everyone very comfortable stepping into this space that may be new to them, right? There's an education component that comes with the actual asset class. But when it comes with the entity that they're interfacing with, we look like and check the boxes that make them feel very secure and comfortable.
Amazing. Sticking to the topic of regulation, but maybe pivoting our focus towards what's to come. I know you guys take a very, forward-looking approach in terms of trying to not only preempt and predict what's coming down the pipe, but also be prepared for it from a product compliance, et cetera, side of things. When we think about just from January of this year, we have a new administration. We have more and more crypto related actions. I don't want to say regulation just yet, but it's all in the news. Curious how your team is both ingesting the new information. Does this make you more optimistic? Because a lot of our nonprofit partners and maybe folks on the fence are saying, well, we're hearing a lot of positive and constructive things. What can we, assume to be true maybe a year, 5 years from now, but also maybe just getting that level of comfort to say, okay, this is obviously a regulated space, but it's being taken very seriously. We see things like SEC starting to unwind some of its past actions. Just curious, and not that you have to be prescriptive here at all, but curious as to how you see the future of crypto kind of unfolding now that it's taken more of a mainstream, let's say, focal point in the regulators' eyes these days.
Yeah, no, I think all very good points. It's been an exciting year for sure. And I will generalize with the conclusion that the crypto landscape is just evolving rapidly, right? For all of us that have been in it for quite some time, we're very excited about all this activity for sure. Most recently, right, we saw last Friday, the 7th, the first ever White House crypto summit. That was really, really exciting. We've seen, the strategic reserve announcement come out, right? So all of these US kind of strategic announcements are coming up. And I think those are all steps in the right direction in terms of legitimizing crypto further, not only for the US, but globally and for both institutional and retail investors here. I think we need to see some of that action now come through, right? A lot of it has made headlines, but we haven't seen that much change, Pietro, as you mentioned, from the regulatory front just yet. So I think right now we're all in a position where we are digesting these changes. Most recently in the past 2 weeks, the volatility in the market definitely persists in the near term, but think it is in the near term. I think the market is positioning itself for a stronger future, taking again all this information in, understanding all the moving pieces. At the end of the day, we've always felt on the Gemini side, I've always felt personally, crypto's the long game. So these are really exciting changes that are happening right now, and hopefully for some great impact in the future. But I think a piece that you highlighted that I want to second there is the involvement, right? Is the mainstream, this is becoming something we are all reading about every day in the news. When I started at Gemini 7 years ago, that was not the case. And so I think that mainstream mentality of this asset is actually very helpful, right? We're seeing more and more institutional players like your traditional hedge funds and your public companies get involved. That increased engagement in this asset class is a positive across the board, right? A lot of the retail investment will follow. Hopefully, a lot of the regulatory changes will follow as well. So I think we're all keen to see what happens next, but definitely taking it all in right now.
One of the through lines that comes from that statement, and I think just, looking at the positioning from the administration that I kind of relay to folks, friends, family, whoever may be on the fence thinking about crypto, is just like, well, if it's good enough for the US balance sheet, it maybe has a place in your portfolio, right sized and everything. I'm not trying to convert anybody to be 100% crypto, but yeah, that's just one of those positive reinforcements where people can just stop objecting to the fact that, like, well, we don't have clarity. It's like we're slowly but surely chipping away at making it, much more clear. And I think that's a, overall positive, like you say. And 7 years in the game, this is like something we would have never guessed would have happened so long ago.
Yeah, it's definitely been really exciting. I think, there's a lot going on for sure. Again, we're kind of seeing that in the market as we react on a daily basis, more in the short term. But I think in the long term, we're setting ourselves up for further success for sure.
Yeah. And given, some of these recent developments, and as we said, a little bit of, near term, volatility, but the potential, on the long term, for some new market catalysts, you're squarely in that institutional space and working with those institutional clients. How has the velocity since, we've rolled over into 2025 changed, and what are you seeing from your vantage point, and the kinds of questions that you're getting from your own customers?
Yeah. I would say, generally speaking, we've always had a consistent institutional customer base, particularly at Gemini. I would say as we've seen this new regime step in, we're definitely seeing that increase, right? You're seeing a little bit of a herd mentality now on the institutional side. We've seen the success of a lot of these ETFs that were more recently launched in the past year, right? That's driving continued adoption on the retail investor side, but also provoking a lot of other institutional players to step into this space, potentially hearing things of maybe the government taking a stance on some of those topics as well. So I think, again, seeing some of these big names of MicroStrategy, of Goldman Sachs, of Blackstone, of Fidelity, you name them, a lot of these names that everyone considers household from an institutional side, right, are stepping into crypto. That's making everyone comfortable both, on the investment side. If they're already kind of in the space, they're talking about it more. And if they have not yet been in the space, we're seeing many people put out new strategies surrounding these assets. So I think generally speaking, right, we're seeing continued adoption for sure. And it's, trickling in, snowball effect.
Oh, 100%. I was going to ask, actually, maybe if we just shift gears a little bit, because I want to be conscious of some of our listeners who are either maybe a little newer to crypto and they come from the traditional philanthropy world, or maybe they're like sort of one foot in each camp and have, a really great background in both, but maybe want to hear from, a practitioner like yourself. Is there anything just from your, like Nick was saying, your vantage point where you sit that you would say as like, not even a recommendation or maybe just anything in terms of, if you're newer to this space, you have 7 years under your belt at Gemini, which is, for everyone listening, like literally multiple lifetimes in crypto. And, like I'm starting to get gray hairs myself on this, but like, I'm curious if you have anything that you typically say to a new entrant, whether it's an institution or an individual who's really trying to like right size this in their mind. Obviously, crypto's not 100% of what you think about. Maybe it is for us because we work in the space, but like for those of us who live normal lives, like what would you recommend, and how do you recommend folks get involved, and maybe where does Gemini play a role in that?
I would say, generally speaking, for someone who's new to the space and looking to get into it, right? A platform like Gemini makes it really, really simple and easy to open up an account, similar to you opening up a bank account at your local branch. You're able to do the same via Gemini, utilize our mobile app for really easy access to the asset class, and you can make smaller contributions into this. The investment size really gives you an entry point that anyone can be comfortable with. I think, particularly looking at some of the features that I see a lot of our new entrants take advantage of are recurring buys, right? You can set it up so $50, $20, whatever you may be comfortable with, you can set up recurring buys into some of these assets. And I think that allows people to get their toes wet without jumping into the deep end all the way. I think particularly, right, when we think about the nonprofit space, what an incredible way to take in potentially some new donors, a donor base that you haven't accessed before. And I think, of course, we've seen that, the three of us with the Giving Block and a lot of these nonprofits, continuing to onboard with us because they have donors that are looking to give them Bitcoin, Ethereum, a stable coin, whatever it may be. And so I think access to that donor class, access to a different user is really important and really exciting. But again, I think in terms of the entry point, it's fairly low. And so everyone has the ability to kind of get their toes wet before jumping in all the way.
Yeah, and for a lot of our, clients, that it's we've seen a marked increase in, the the willingness to kind of move into the space, whereas before crypto was kind of tolerated but sort of held a little bit at arm's length. Now it's being much more embraced, and so that combined with so many organizations getting those calls from donors saying, "Listen, do you have the capacity to accept a donation in crypto? Because that makes a lot of financial sense for me right now, and it would allow me to support you guys in a much more significant way than I currently do." So, we've started to really see that like volume get turned up there. And, 2025 has been a really interesting year. And as they start to move into this space, it's encouraging to be able to say, like, look, this isn't super complicated. We've got a really great back end infrastructure that makes this entirely turnkey, and it's got a lot of great security layered into this. So it gives a lot of folks confidence in the space to start taking a much more serious look at this. And all to say too, I mean, your end customers and their customers are donors as well. So we're seeing so many more organizations that are not only looking this as a way to gain net new donors, but this is coming from many of their existing donors, their existing supporters that are now incorporating this into their financial portfolio in a much larger way too. So it's been a really interesting evolution. Our, Patreon and I have been here for a long time, and the philanthropy space has evolved tremendously, and in crypto philanthropy moves at just the same kind of like lightning speed as the industry in general. So I guess looking out to this year, is there something that the Gemini team is really excited about? And I want to leave this like really open ended. It could be something related to the business, the market, trajectories. As you look to 2025, anything that you kind of think like, I'm really excited for the potential of X, Y, or Z.
Yeah. If we had a crystal ball, but I would say, generally speaking, right, again, always continue to focus on the long game. I think, again, having, some tenure here and definitely in the space, that's continued to be the driver, just continue to innovate and evolve in the space and support all of the changes that are rapidly coming our way. Pietro, that advertisement outside of where you are in Miami, right, that's our newest campaign, Go Where Dollars Won't. And I think, it's just such an interesting focal point. And I think it exactly highlights where we stand in the space today, which is innovation, change, but continuing to be super optimistic and kind of take yourself out of the norm. And who knows what's going to come next, right? But it's going to be exciting. It's going to be different, and you're going to have access to so much more. And so that interplay is really what we are seeing right now, at least in the US, again, with this new regime in place from a regulatory standpoint. Hopefully we start to see some of those changes come into play. Hopefully we start to see the market react, right? Both on the traditional side and on the digital asset front. So I think there's continual growth, most definitely from the tech side of things that really, is the backing of this entire industry. But with that, we're going to see more and more adoption, hopefully more and more at a government level as well, which will in turn lead the institutional level. The retails will follow. And obviously the donors will be a part of it the whole way. So really, really excited for all to come. I think we're in an interesting time right now. Listen, it's only March, so the year is still young. We've actually just started, which is crazy because it feels like so much has gone on. But I think, thinking about the long game, thinking ahead, hard to predict for sure. But I think we're going to continue to see some of this market volatility in the short term, and hopefully things will kind of steady themselves out as we get further down the year.
Yeah, I appreciate that reminder that it's only March, because it does feel like we've been through quite a bit of a ringer the first 3 months of the year. So that's always great to have that perspective. And I think that's kind of indicative of what you've been saying this whole time, which is like Gemini, kind of smooths out what is otherwise a bumpy ride in terms of playing that long game, not just focusing on what we're doing next quarter or next 6 months from now. We try to take the same approach with our nonprofit partners as well, because again, this is a long-term trend that'll look very hectic maybe in the short term, but you look back and it's like, oh wow, it was up and to the right for the last 15 years or 10 years or whatever it may be, when we kind of let the dust settle. So I mean, I think that's one thing that we try to thematically approach this whole show with, is like, say, hey, we're going to update you on the short term, but also let's not forget that every news article is probably like stale within 48 hours anyway. And it's kind of just true of how fast everything's innovating and moving, which is super exciting. One last thing I wanted to touch on, because it's super near and dear to me in my role, which is just on the topic of stablecoins. We've seen a lot of volume come from stablecoin donations on the nonprofit side, and a lot of folks are really leaning into this idea that these are just digital dollars that are on a blockchain, and they're really easy to move around and really easy to donate, or really even easy to use in like daily commerce. Just curious if you had any thoughts on the proliferation of stable coins and how that's going to become, I would say, a growing trend in the US and maybe across the world, because we certainly have a lot of ideas as to why we think folks are using them. But you sit in a very unique perspective where you have folks coming to your exchange asking for stable coins, maybe using stable coins. Just wanted to pick your brain on that really quickly.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely a fair question. And for those that don't know what a stable coin, maybe it's helpful to share just kind of from a definition standpoint, right? A stable coin is unlike a Bitcoin or Ethereum that is highly volatile, right? And those prices are fluctuating based off of market activity. A stable coin is a stable asset, typically is pegged to US dollar or some sort of currency where you have a predictable and set value. So I think, right, looking at the nonprofit space and donations that have come in, or even from an individual investor, right, they're holding those assets, which are digital assets, but they are pegged to some sort of stable amount, right? So that volatility is kind of being hedged against, is exactly the way to put it. So I think, again, we're seeing increase in the usage of stablecoins. So Pietro, exactly what you guys are seeing on your end, we are seeing the same. But it's really exciting because instead of just using a US dollar, right, that we're sending a wire transfer, ACH, or your Venmo payment, whatever it may be, you're dealing with it on the blockchain. And so much faster transactions there, obviously cross-border payments and all those good things. So I think, it gets us into the topic of DeFi or decentralized finance more, which I'll just throw that term out there. We don't need to dive into it deeper. But I think, it's really interesting. It's made the cryptocurrency space really easy in terms of on and off ramp, right? So access is becoming that much easier. Potentially, you don't need that fiat currency from your bank account. You could have something like a stable coin that does, serve the same purpose, have the same value. So, we're seeing more and more stable coins come out. Gemini supports 3, 4, of them today and ever growing there. But I think really interesting. We're definitely going to see continued usage of stable coins here for sure.
Yeah, and to tie a bow on that from the philanthropy standpoint, we talk to a lot of nonprofits. It's funny, your campaign right now, like "Go Where Dollars Won't," is very similar in the nonprofit space, especially when it comes to like geopolitical disruptions during crises. And the fact that supporters can send these assets quickly, and those nonprofits can even deploy some of these assets where typical fiat currencies have a lot of challenges or might be entirely unavailable altogether. Crypto has served as a really cool deployment of critically needed, financial support in those jurisdictions. And that is a leading edge of philanthropy that we've been watching. No question why we've seen such big growth on the stablecoin, side of things in terms of, donations. And so we've got some nonprofits that are really taking a very innovative approach in terms of like international development, emergency response. So yeah, I expect you guys will continue to see more of that. We're going to continue to see more of that. A really cool side of things. But I guess to kind of wrap things up, I mean, if people want to learn more about Gemini, I mean, I'll say like you guys have a fantastic blog, but where else can people kind of learn about you guys and Gemini, and if they want to start taking some of those early steps, where can they go? Where's some resources?
Yeah, definitely. I think our blog is a great place in terms of synthesizing some of the great announcements that come out on our end. We are very active across our social platforms. So X is definitely home base there for sure. And then I think another great resource that Gemini has worked quite hard to collaborate with is actually our Cryptopedia. So really great knowledge base there in terms of what is a stable coin, defining some of the assets, right, that we allow on our platform for trading, understanding kind of some of the capabilities out there in the space. So I think definitely check us out on all social platforms. Gemini.com is where all that starts for sure, but a lot of good resources out there and easy access for everyone.
Fantastic. Well, Paget, thanks so much for joining. And everybody, if you made it this far into the show, we'll have all of those links in the show notes as well. But on behalf of everybody here at the Give Me Back, Paget, thanks so much for joining. And everyone else, we'll see you next week.